We at Unity in the Heart of Austin are committed to inspiring people to awaken to their unique divine nature through spiritual teachings, through heart-to-heart connections, through prayer, and through sacred service. And we provide tools, spiritual tools, that allow you to live your best possible life. I'm Reverend Tony Roebuck, minister at Unity in the Heart of Austin, and I truly hope that you are inspired by and that you are transformed by, you enjoy this week's spiritual message. And if you would like to leave a donation, a tithe, to help the work of this ministry in supporting you and others like you, then we are truly grateful for your generosity and for helping to make the world a better place. Because we know that life is meant to be good. We've been working with a series of lessons called The Quest, and we're on a journey, a spiritual journey. And it's a journey that actually has no beginning and no end, because we're already on it, and we are already present. We were last night watching a wonderful documentary based on the work of Thich Nhat Hanh, and one of the things he shared was that we're always seeking to arrive. But the reality is we've already arrived. So part of our work is to learn that we've already arrived, that the present moment is really where we are most in the essence and truth of who and what we are. And when we try to be in other places, which we do constantly, other times, past, future, other places, that we're not truly present. We're not present to who we are, and we're not present to the light that is within us. So this week our lesson is really about the subject of good and evil. And I came across a story of a Sunday school teacher who was asked the students to draw a picture of their favorite Old Testament story. And she's moving around looking at the different pictures, and she sees some really nice ones that young people are drawing. And she comes to this one young boy, and he's drawing, and she sees that he's drawn a car with an old man driving, and two people in the back, a man and a woman, and they're partially clothed. And she said, "Well, excuse me, what Old Testament story is this that you're drawing here?" And she said, "Oh, well, it's obvious. It's God driving Adam and Eve out of the Garden of Eden." Ba-dum-bum. So I also came across a cute saying. Cartoon, actually. You guys know the Family Circus is one of my favorite cartoons, and Billy says well, Mom, if it's wrong to have midnight treats, why did God put lights in the refrigerator? Wondered that myself, So we're going to talk a little bit about this understanding, the idea of good and evil. And the scripture from this week is Matthew chapter 16, verse 23. And Jesus was out in the desert, and he says to Satan, "Get behind me, Satan. You are a hindrance to me, for you are not on the side of God, but of man." Now, we've been taught for thousands of years that there is somehow this being out there called Satan or the devil that is basically a being that's fighting a war with God. And I'm going to suggest to you that we are, by trying to make this being out there, either in hell or wherever, that we're actually participating in evil. And I'll say a little bit more about what I mean by that. Because ultimately, evil is any belief system that we have that denies the presence of the divine. Any belief system that says that we are somehow separate from the divine. And when we have a conception of something that is somehow outside of the presence of the divine, we are actually participating in darkness. I'll say a little bit more about that as we go along. And so part of our work is to really not necessarily try to get rid of the darkness, but to really begin to understand the understanding that there really is only one presence and one power in the universe, in this place, and in our lives, as we say in Unity. They give a story in the lesson about the ancient Greek sculptor. I'm not sure I'm going to say his name right, but I think it's Phidias. And Phidias was carving the statue of Athena that was to go into the Parthenon. And as he was carving every day, people came to watch and observe him. And then one person, he was actually behind the statue in the back of it, working on some detail of the hair of Athena. And someone says, well, why are you even bothering with that? Because it's going to be inside the temple with its back up against the wall. Why do you care how that looks? Nobody's going to know. And Phidias said, I will know. And there's a part of us, I think, that really recognizes and knows when we are working with the energy of good, of light, and when we're working with an energy that is somehow not that. And part of our divine nature is having this compass within us that gives us some awareness when we are working, as I say, toward that which is anabolic, or working with that which is catabolic. And anabolic, which is that which is life-enhancing, and catabolic is that which is life-depleting. And we do have two different energies in our world. And interestingly enough, we have those two different energies in our world, but I'm going to suggest to you that ultimately there's only one energy. And that is the energy of creation. And the energy of creation is and of itself an energy for good. In Hinduism, they have different gods, they say, but they're actually different aspects of a oneness that is God. But they have different names for God. They have thousands of different names for God, which is really a way of trying to describe the divine. And one of the most high awarenesses they have of God or the divine, they call Brahma, or Brahman. And Brahman, if you look at the definition of Brahman, it actually translates into absolute benevolence. I love that. It just speaks to me. Absolute benevolence. And benevolence really means good. In Unity, we have the saying, there's only one presence and one power, God, the good. And so this creative presence and power is always at work, and it's working in and through us, and ultimately that presence and power is working for a higher good, a higher awareness, a higher experience and expression of the possibilities of benevolence in life and in the world. And your spirit, the spirit that is within you, that we have been created in the image and likeness of God, that exists in each and every one of us in some form, in some way, in a very unique way, I might add, is in tune with, ultimately, the light. And the light is another expression for that which is good. Another name for God that we oftentimes call light is good, but we also use that metaphor of light. And when we think about good and evil, we use the terms light and darkness. And evil in and of itself, interestingly enough, has no substance or power. Charles Fillmore, the co-founder of Unity, says, in divine mind there is no recognition of evil conditions. Such conditions have no basis of reality. And to rid ourselves of any appearance of evil, let us change our thought at once and begin to build a consciousness that knows nothing but good. And let us affirm, I'm a child of the Absolute. God is good. And I am His perfect child. And everything that comes into my life is good. Now that's sometimes a bit of a challenge for us, isn't it? I know it is for me. There are times when I really want to make everything out there, or not everything, make certain things, especially certain circumstances and situations, and some people, into the image of what I think is bad and evil. There's a part of us that does that. We are participating in a process where we are labeling circumstances and situations in such a way that they hold particular energies for us. And by doing so, we're actually giving more energy and power to those things being that way for us. And so what I'm really getting with some of the work I'm doing in our Wednesday night class on whatever arises, love that, is to recognize that whatever comes up out here in the world as something that I experience as, quote, evil, is ultimately there because it's there to show me something that is going on inside of me and how I respond or react to what's going on out there. And if I can really take the time to shift my awareness and energy to an experience of love and to hold that part of me that is reacting to the experience out here in love, it actually shifts my energy, and the very act of shifting my energy changes my awareness and my perception of what's going on out here. That make sense? And so part of our work, one of my favorite quotes is from Dr. Martin Luther King, when he said, "Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." And I'm going to suggest to you that he also said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that." And so our work is not to try and get rid of the darkness. It's not to get rid of the darkness out there. Our work is not to get rid of the darkness in ourselves. Because in reality, the more we try to get rid of the darkness, we become a part of and participate in giving more energy and power to the darkness. And this is what I believe Jesus was talking about when he said, turn the other cheek. Turn the other cheek. When someone slaps you on one cheek, you don't slap them back. You turn the other cheek not because you're going to be passive, but because you're going to look in a different direction. You're going to see with a different perception. You're going to look in the direction of what you want to participate in and what you want to create more of and what you want to experience more of. In a very real sense, you're going to turn from the darkness to the light. And so part of our work is learning that practice. Learning the practice of simply turning our awareness and our attention into those things that we want to manifest even more of in our lives and to express more of in our lives. And so I love the image of this as light. How many of you, let me ask you a question. How many of you have ever been able to put out a candle by putting in more darkness? Doesn't work, does it? How many of you have been able to dispel the darkness by lighting a candle? So I'm going to suggest to you that this principle, this idea, this understanding is that there really is no power in the darkness. See, there's no power in darkness to put out the light. You can't add more darkness to a room that already has a candle in it. That make sense? Now, don't get me wrong, the candle can burn out, or we can blow it out, or it can simply be consumed, and then all we have to do is light another candle. But it's not the darkness that's putting out the light. And yet, you walk into a dark room, you walk into a time, an experience, an energy of darkness, and you light a candle. The darkness begins to be dispelled. It shifts. One of the things I did when I was in college, I used to actually go spelunking. How many of you have been spelunking? I mean, serious spelunking. I mean, these are uncharted caves. Caves that very few people, if anybody, have been in before. And I remember a group of us going spelunking to a cave that had been recently found up in Arkansas. And we found that there was this magnificent cavern in the middle of this cave that had a waterfall in it. Oh, it was just amazing. And we went in there and we all put out all of our lights. And it was completely, that's the darkest I have ever experienced anything. It had this amazing sound of the waterfall going on in it. So all you heard was a waterfall. You couldn't hear each other. It was so voluminous. You had to really just get right into each other's ear and yell to really be heard. And so I was in this place of absolute darkness. And yet I was actually one of the most peaceful and beautiful places that I'd ever been. And I felt so clear, and I felt so peaceful. I had another experience where I decided to go back to that same cavern. And a buddy of mine decided to go and explore again, and it was just the two of us this time. And he wanted to go down and explore one particular cavern, and I said, well, yeah, that sounds good, but I want to go back and go find this other one. So we separated, which is something you don't do when you do spelunking, by the way. We learn things, right? So I'm actually going through this cavern, and to get into this cavern, you have to go through a very, very narrow channel. And you have to get on your hands and knees and crawl. And you're actually in mud, and it's not the trip there is not necessarily a fun one. And I had this experience of crawling through this tunnel, and I was wearing one of these big military-type belts, big web belts with canteens and things on each side of it, and things that you need for spelunking and, that sort of thing. I had a rope on one side. And I'm crawling in this space, and I got hung and got stuck. And I was yelling and yelling and yelling, and my buddy couldn't hear me because the sound of the waterfall was so strong. I could still already hear that. And also he was in another cavern farther away. And I thought, okay, well, I'm stuck. I'm not going to get out of this. It's amazing all of the thoughts that went through my head of this is where I'm going to die. And a lot of fear came up for me about that. And in the middle of that, I remembered to pray, ask for help, to let go and trust. And I found myself being just as peaceful at that moment as I had been in the middle of that cavern, whereas a moment before I'd been panicked. So for me, what I did was I turned my attention away from the fear I had. And I focused my attention on what I knew could help, which was the divine. And by the way, I died in that cavern, and I'm No, my buddy finally found me. He said, I looked. He said I had trouble finding the one you were in, and he finally found me and was able to reach up far enough to be able to unhook my belt and got it loose, and I was able to crawl out again. So I had nightmares about that for many years. But I had nightmares, but then I also had the remembrance of looking to the light. So even in the nightmares, I was able to remind myself, oh yes, there's a presence, a power, and there's a help available. Even when we're stuck in places that seem really dark. And to me, that's been a really powerful metaphor for me in my life. There are times when I have gotten those places in life where I felt like I was just as stuck as I was in that cavern, and probably just as fearful, not necessarily about dying, but just things not going the way that I wanted them to go. It's amazing how we get into fear about things just not being the way we want them to be, don't we? And thinking that somehow that our fear is going to make them be the way that we want them to be. When in reality, it does just the opposite. It moves us in a direction that we don't want to go. And so our resistance to what is, our resistance to what we don't want, is one of the ways that we're actually feeding the darkness in ourselves. And we're actually kind of participating in really putting more energy out there. Now, one of the things I think it's important to remember, there's only one presence and one power, which is the absolute good. And so one of the questions that's asked in our quest lesson is, are you telling me that there's not evil in the world? And that's not what we're saying. Because yes, you will see and experience things out here that feel and look and are dark. But what we're saying is, ultimately, those things that we see and feel out here in the world that are dark have no real power in and of themselves. And if we take the time to shine a light, even in those circumstances, and the light can be simple as simply acknowledging there's only one presence here. Taking a deep breath, breathing into that knowing, that assurance that there really is only one presence here. And so I would guarantee, well, I won't guarantee, but I'll bet that there's somebody here that's going through some kind of dark experience. Anybody have a dark experience that's in your life? We've all got different stuff that goes on, and they look dark to us at times, don't they? And so what if we were just simply to acknowledge that even in the middle of that experience, but we can't see it, because it's dark, by the way. We can't see it because it's dark, right? But even in the middle of that, there's a light. One of the things that has been discovered, of course, is that even in the depths of the ocean, where no light can really reach, there's these amazing creatures that have a luminousness about themselves. And they'll have a light that comes not from something out there, but it comes from within their own nature. And I'm going to suggest to you that each and every one of us is just like that. We have a light that shines within our own consciousness, within our own being, within our own nature, that radiates even in the midst of those dire moments. And if we're willing to turn our energy away from the fears and the doubts and the concerns and yeah buts, as I call them, and just simply let that energy of light and love radiate to whatever is going on inside of us about that experience. So here's the point I'm trying to get to also, is that rather than trying to get something to change out there, let's send love to that part of ourselves that's really having trouble and wrestling with and difficulty with what's going on out there. And when you do that, as Jesus said, perfect love casts out fear. It's amazing how the fear begins to dissipate. It begins to shift. Now, circumstances may or may not change immediately. But I can tell you, if you continue to love that part of yourself that's having challenges and difficulties with that, an amazing guidance that begins to come through. An amazing awareness comes through, and you begin to see and experience insights or even hear a little voice that will take you in a particular direction that will either move you through that experience or it'll help the experience to move past you. That make sense? Now, there's this idea of God, of the devil and Satan also. And you know, one of the things that I discovered some years ago is when I was reading Scripture and doing some study of the Scriptures, that in almost all the cases, and I can't think of any that was not the case, when Jesus was referring to Satan, the word that was translated as Satan means adversary. And so when he was talking about the adversary, and the adversary is really any adverse thought or idea or belief system that feels that is somehow in opposition to the good or the divine. And one of the things that Jesus said about the devil is that the devil is a liar and the father of lies. I always love that, believe it or not. The devil is a liar and the father of lies. Now, this is a metaphorical way of describing and saying that that which we believe to be a devil is ultimately an illusion. And he went on to say, and there's no truth in him. But these are the translations that have come through. And so what he was saying is the adversary is false. There's no truth in this idea that there's this being out there called Satan. And anything that we have attributed that to is really a thought and a feeling and a belief system that somehow says that there's a separation between us and our good. And that in and of itself is an illusion. That's what we call evil, you know. Anything that is not what we want, anything that is not the way we think it's supposed to be, anything that is we see as being difficult or harmful or a challenge or adverse to the benevolence is ultimately simply a belief system that says that there's that there's more than one power, and that power that we call evil has power, and that's an illusion. And so ultimately our work is to shine the light on that illusion and say there's really only one power here. ultimately there is the presence of the divine. And when I find myself going through difficult situations where I feel stuck in my little tunnel that I'm going through to my cave to find that beautiful waterfall inside myself, and I get hung up somewhere with all my stuff that I'm carrying, and I get hooked, and I get stuck, and I get fearful, if I'm willing to stop and just simply light a candle inside myself, it's amazing how things began to shift. And the first thing, of course, has happened. I do ask for help, don't get me wrong. And the help that comes sometimes comes in the form of a buddy, a friend, or sometimes it's just the universe opening the channels so that I can see more clearly, or opening my vision so that I can know more and understand more, or opening the possibilities that are within me and the strength that I have. And so when you're practicing going through your life experience, this journey that you're on in life, what I invite you to do is ask yourself the question, am I choosing to try and put out darkness? To dispel the darkness? Have you ever taken and tried to put one of those dampers that you put candles out with? Have you tried to ever do that with darkness? Doesn't work very well, does it? So rather than trying to put out the darkness, just let's light a candle. Be the candle. Jesus said, you are the light of the world. So I invite you to just make that choice. I choose to be the light in this circumstance. Think about that for a moment. Take a nice deep breath. Think about some experience that you have felt adverse in some way, challenged by, upset by, difficult, hurting perhaps even. And just make a choice and just say to yourself, I choose to be the light in this circumstance. I choose to be the light. And so it is. Let's go into our meditation time.
Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Let's sing that twice. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you. Last time. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true. With thanksgiving, I'll be a living sanctuary for you.
Take a nice deep breath now. Just breathe into the heart space. And as you breathe into the heart space, take a moment now and just begin to visualize and see within yourself and within your heart a candle. And as you look at that candle, just allow yourself to bask in the radiance of the light and the good, the benevolence, the love. And begin to notice that if we turn our back to the candle, what we see is our own shadow. And just notice your shadow for a moment. And rather than trying to drive the shadow away or hide from it, just notice it and I invite you to send love to your shadow. And as you send love to your shadow, let the light shine through you. Let the light of that candle radiate through your heart, through your mind, through your very nature, through your thoughts and feelings. And let yourself be an instrument of that light, that good, that love. Shining light into those dark places that are ultimately really your shadow. And as you shine light into that and send love to that part of you that is a part of you that's really desiring and seeking the light, notice that you're getting opportunities and insights and awarenesses that help you to turn back toward the light. Turn back toward love, grace, benevolence. And just feel yourself as a radiant center of that light now. And I accept being the light of my world. Let this be an affirmation for you. I choose to be the light in my world. And I accept being the light in my world. Take a nice deep breath now. Give thanks for the power and the energy of this light that is always available, always present, always in you, and always shining and willing to shine through you. And so it is. Take a nice deep breath. Let your awareness move back into this room, this time and place, and feel yourself immersed in that light and radiating that light and love of the divine. To everyone in this room, and out from this room, out into our world, take another nice deep breath and gently open your eyes. And so it is. Thank you, God.